My name is Madison. I'm a 16-year-old girl, and the story which I'm about to tell you took place in 2014 when I was 14 years old. I live in a small town in the East Coast US. We have a population of less than 3,000 from my knowledge, and really, it feels like that everyone in our town are connected to any other person within the boundary of our town through a chain of acquaintances of maybe 3 or less. I'm not complaining because if there is a paradise on earth, it's got to be our town. We have virtually no crimes here. Aside from the occasional shenanigans by the local high school kids, nothing disturbing ever happens in this place. We have beautiful beaches, stunning views of the shoreline, and charming architecture all throughout the town. Our town is basically a carbon copy of the picturesque towns you see in teen dramas and movies. We are fortunate to be born here, and I'm fully aware that we are privileged to live the life we live. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that we also do many dumb things that are so often depicted in teen dramas, and one of them happens to be the fascination with Ouija boards. We don't have a lot going on here, so we do what we can to pass the time. As teenagers, it's almost like a rite of passage to have at least one session of Ouija board, and the experience becomes the topic of the week. We milk it for as long as we can. Growing up, I've heard of my sister's experience, my mom's, and even my grandma's. They were scary, but they all had boring endings, which I guess it's a good thing. So when it came time for me to have my own Ouija board experience, although I was a little scared, I didn't concern myself over it too much. One day, my friends and I got together at an abandoned house near the coast. None of us wanted to do it in our own house, out of fear that we may let loose an angry spirit to haunt us for an eternity. My best friend Becca was there, so was her boyfriend Jacob and his friend Henry, and 2 other good friends, Janet and Chloe, joined us as well. We brought flashlights and candles because the house was never on the grid to begin with. It was rumored that the last owner of the house was an elderly gentleman who supposedly lived here all his life. He had no children, so the house became abandoned when he passed away. Anyways, that was what the kids used to say. So we first light the candles and place them about a yard behind us. We all sit on the floor in circle and place the Ouija board in the center. Becca's boyfriend Jacob is 3 years older, and he says he knows how to do it, so he takes the lead. Alright, listen up, you little shits. First of all, I don't want to hear any giggling or you morons acting like clowns. Not you, babe. This is a serious business, and you should respect the process. I'm gonna assign all of you to different roles, and you have to do your job as I say. Becca, you're the documenter. You're gonna take notes of all the information we get from the spirits, and you're gonna decipher them to us. I need Madison, Janet, and Chloe as the energizers. That means you guys will be touching the planchette with me and guiding the spirit's energy on the board. You guys cannot talk during the session, so stay fucking quiet. Henry, you're the screamer. Just scream at the first noise you hear during the session, and also if you see something. Henry doesn't look so happy with his job and says, "Why do I get to be the screamer? The girls are natural at it, let them do it." Jacob responds laughing. "Based on what happened the last time we did this, I say you'll make a fine screamer." For fuck's sake, did you have to bring that up? We all have a good laugh at Henry's expense, but then Jacob quickly shushes us. Alright, energizers, put your hands on the board. As much as I want to be serious, I can't help but laugh at him calling us energizers. We all start laughing like we are high on drugs and can't stop for nearly a minute. We finally managed to compose ourselves again and put our hands on the planchette as Jacob instructed. Then Jacob speaks again. "Is there a spirit in this room?" Nothing happens. "Spirit, this is a safe place. We would like to know if you have a message for someone in this room." We are all quiet, and this time, no one is laughing. I'm concentrating so hard that I can't even hear myself breathe. We still can't hear or see anything, and the planchette rests on the board, showing only small movements from our own hands moving slightly. 20 to 30 seconds passes when Jacob speaks again. Does our presence bother you? Would you like us to leave? That's when suddenly the planchette moves violently to the no inscription on the board. Just by the velocity of the planchette moving, our hands should have been thrown off it, but somehow it feels like we are bound to it by some sort of energy. What is your name, spirit? Nothing happens. Do you have a name? The planchette shakes violently in place. Okay, can you tell me your age? The planchette moves to the number 0 and it stops there. You have no age? Or maybe you don't know your age? Nothing happens. Were you a woman when you were alive? The planchette moves to the no inscription again. So then you were a man? Nothing. The planchette does not move. Okay, so you have no memories of your living days. Then suddenly the planchette moves again and it spells N-O-T-H-U-M-A-N. Not human. You're not human. Jacob has the look of a man waiting for an execution and is unable to say anything further. Then Henry lets out a loud laugh and says, "Stop moving the shit. You're scaring the kids." "I'm not doing anything, you..." Out of nowhere, a strong gust of wind hits all of us in the room, strong enough to not only blow out the flames on the candle, but to knock them on their side. Mind you, we were inside a house with the roof, walls, and windows all intact. There was no possible way for any wind from the outside to slip through the house like that, at the very least not at that strength. Chloe gets up and says she wants to go, but then Jacob quickly grabs her wrist and says, "We have to send away the spirit before we leave, otherwise it could follow any one of us back home, and if that happens, I wouldn't know what to do. Sit back down." Chloe whimpers as she sits on the floor again, then scoots closer to me and grabs my left arm. Jacob proceeds to speak to the spirit. "You're not the spirit we were seeking to meet, and we are going to leave now. Goodbye, spirit." We are all waiting for the planchette to move to the goodbye inscription, but it does not budge at all. "Spirit, we are done here. I'm going to say goodbye now, if that's okay with you." Jacob forcibly tries to move the planchette, but it gets ripped out of our hands and it smacks on the wall near the door. Chloe freaks out and runs out of the house. Jacob follows her to the door, but he does not go beyond that. Instead, he shouts at her, "Chloe, you gotta come back. We have to send the spirit away before we leave. Chloe!" Chloe is gone, and the rest of us are ready to leave as well, but Jacob motions at us to back up and says, "Guys, Chloe is fucked. If you don't want to end up like her, then you better do what I say, so sit back down." We all sit in circle again. Jacob picks up the planchette, closes the door, and sits next to Becca. He grabs the planchette firmly this time, then tells us to put our hands on top of his and to force it to the goodbye inscription on the board. Jacob takes the lead, and we can feel him moving the planchette to the goodbye, but not without resistance. We are all freaked out by what's happening, and I know for certain none of us are trying to sabotage our desperate attempt at sending away the spirit. We push harder and harder, and we can see the planchette advancing. My hand starts to hurt, but I could care less at this point. Finally, we successfully get it to the goodbye inscription, and Jacob tells us to get out of the house. Outside, he grabs an empty can in the yard and starts to pile in some brush, some papers from his pocket, and some dried up branches from the ground. He lights them up, and once the fire is big enough, he throws both the Ouija board and planchette in there. I ask him if that's part of the ritual, and he answers, "No, but I never channeled the devil before instead of a spirit. I just don't want to leave any stone unturned." The fire engulfed everything inside the can, to eventually all that was left inside were ashes and some unrecognizable pieces of melted plastic. Jacob poured his Gatorade in the can, and we heard the last flames go out with the sound of sizzling. Before leaving with Becca, Jacob said, "Don't ever try this again. That thing in there, the devil or whatever the hell it is, it knows us now. If you give it any chance to contact you in this world again, there's no one in this world who'll be able to help you. You'll be fucked for life. You'll be the devil's bitch for an eternity. Remember that." Jacob and Becca went their way first, then Janet, Henry, and I walked together to our homes because we all lived a block or less away from each other. I went home and told my mom and sister about it, but they both laughed at me, saying that Jacob and Henry had gotten us really good. I was there. I knew what I saw and felt. I knew my mom and sister were wrong, but there was no point in discussing it further with them. The next day, when I went to school, the first thing I did was to look for Chloe, because when I called her the day before, her mom told me that she was in bed feeling ill. I couldn't speak to her ever since she ran out of the abandoned house, so I was eager to see for myself if she was okay. I couldn't find her by the locker, so I waited until third period when we had chemistry class together. Becca, Janet, and I were already seated when Chloe walked in, but she wouldn't even make eye contact with us. I went over to her and asked, "Chloe, are you okay? Why didn't you answer my calls?" She answered, "I don't want to talk about it." "Is everything okay?" She doesn't say anything. "Chloe, you're starting to worry me. What's going on with you?" Then she shouted at me in anger, "I said I don't want to talk about it. Get off my fucking case, whore." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was Chloe, the shy and reserved girl whose only friends are me, Becca, and Janet. The worst thing I ever heard her say was, "bitch," and not even in a bad way. She would say that sometimes as a joke, like we all do between friends. This time though, she meant it when she called me a whore. Everyone in the classroom looked at us, and so I quickly went back to my seat to stop drawing any more unwanted attention. Becca and Janet had the "what the fuck" look on their faces, and I gently shook my head to hint at them, "not now." Chloe hasn't spoken to us since that day. I tried several times, but every time she shuts me down with really foul language. She's been skipping school a lot as well, and when she does come to school, she often falls asleep on her desk. Her grades have nosedived, she doesn't hang out with anyone, and her parents have been taking her to see a shrink for close to a year now. Nothing bad happened to me or to any of the other guys that were present during the Ouija board session. Jacob assured us several times that we'd be okay since we sent the spirit away before ending the session. I asked him if we could help Chloe somehow, and he said all he knew were the things that his brother had taught him before leaving town for college. In other words, he knew just a little more than we did about Ouija boards. Things have been the same for the past 2 years, and as much as I would like to help Chloe, I haven't got a single clue where to start because she refuses to even talk to me. I don't want to try anything from the internet in case I make things even worse. But if any of your listeners have some insights on what's happening with Chloe, I would really appreciate some advice on the matter. I don't care what it is. If you've got any relevant information, please do share. Thank you. In our town, we have many urban legend-like stories that were passed down through many generations. We have families here whose ancestral roots go as far back as the early 1800s, so it's a town with rich history, both the good and the bad. The town's demographic makeup comprises of roughly 80% white, about 5% of individuals who have Native American ancestry, and I say the rest of the 15% are Asian, Hispanic, and African Americans. As far as small towns are concerned, we have a large population of Native Americans when you compare it to the national average. I check the box in any official documents as Caucasian because that's how I look, but my family has always been proud of its Native American heritage that began many generations ago, and the connection continued as recently as my father marrying a fellow Native American, my mother who's a Navajo. I know I shouldn't be saying this or even thinking like this, but sometimes I laugh when I look at the family photos on the wall of our house and see a bunch of white people who call themselves Cherokee. I guess what I'm trying to say is, for a while there, it felt as though the Cherokee culture was slowly dying in my generation for many reasons, but mainly for the fact that we no longer retain many of the physical characteristics that define a pure Cherokee. I don't want to give out the wrong impression that I do not embrace my heritage, but all I'm saying is that it's impractical in everyday life situations. Say, for example, when I'm getting to know someone and I talk to them about my background, I tell them that I'm Cherokee American, and the look that I get is priceless 99% of the times. It overcomplicates things unnecessarily because I don't want to explain to everyone I meet about my genealogy from start to finish, so that's my excuse for not knowing much about the Cherokee traditions. In my defense, my little sister is worse than me, but then again, my older brother is pretty knowledgeable in that field, so I guess no excuse. So anyhow, one ridiculously hot day in 2005, my cousin from Mississippi came to our home unannounced. He goes by his Native American name, Negan. No, not the same Negan in The Walking Dead. His name is spelled Nigan, and it means ahead. Negan used to live with us when he was a kid. His parents passed away before he even hit puberty, and my parents had taken him in because no one else was willing. Negan, in some ways, you can say is very devoted to the Native American culture and traditions. He is very knowledgeable in that field and tries to live as true Native as much as he can. So you think he'd be very close to my parents, but it's the complete opposite. My dad does not like Negan at all because, in his own words, he does not respect the order of nature. Negan used to practice the ancient rituals in our backyard, but then my dad came home early one day and caught him during the ritual ceremony. He forbade any and all future rituals and told Negan that he shouldn't practice something that he doesn't have a full understanding of, especially not in our backyard. Dad put away all his Cherokee ritual-related items in a locker and locked it up with a huge padlock. That didn't stop Negan though. He just moved the location of the ritual to the forest, which conveniently is right behind our house. And as for the items necessary for the rituals, he made them himself with sticks and stones. Yeah, literally with sticks and stones. My mom tried to be more understanding. She felt as though Negan was compensating for the loss of his parents through spiritual healing, but my dad felt differently about it. He used to tell me, my sister, and brother to never go with Negan into the forest. He said what Negan was doing was extremely dangerous, that Negan was channeling the spirits of our ancestors for his own selfish needs. My dad used to say that the spirits are like children when they first come back to this world. If you guide them back with love and peaceful heart, they will become benevolent spirits that will look after their descendants. However, if you bring them back for your own selfish reasons, without the love that's required to guide them to the right path, they end up becoming evil and hateful. Dad told us to inform him whenever we suspected Negan of performing the rituals. When we did, he would take his ritual items into the forest and come back several hours later. Mom would come home after work and find Dad all sweaty, so she would ask him what made him soak up in sweat, and my dad always used to say, "I've been cleaning after Negan's mess." This made Mom feel really bad because Negan is a relative on her side of the family. He's the son of her late sister. Negan is 2 years older than my older brother, and he was 12 when he first came to our home. Dad put up with him for 6 years until he was 18, and by then, Negan voluntarily moved out to eventually settle down in Mississippi. I personally remember Negan fondly though. The last time I saw him was when he had moved out, so that's 2 years ago, and I actually kind of missed him. I'm 26 today, but I was 15 when this story took place. Negan was kind of an alpha figure for both me and my brother. He had that fearlessness about him that made him look so badass. So when Negan came back, my brother and I were both happy. My dad also welcomed him into our house, even though he probably wasn't too happy about it. He was only staying for 3 days, so it wasn't a big deal anyways. The first night, we had a family dinner and all was fine, although there was one weird thing that happened later that night. I woke up at 2 a.m. and I had to take a leak. I thought at first I had woken up due to my full bladder, but as it turns out, there was a noise coming from the room next to mine where Negan was staying. It sounded like he was sniffing something, and he just wouldn't stop. It was loud and annoying, and I wanted to tell him that it was being too noisy, but since he was only staying for a few days, I figured I'd just deal with it. The next night though, it was much worse. The noise coming from his room woke me up again, and this time I had to tell him something. I walked over to his room and knocked on the door. The sniffing sound from his room was so loud that it sounded like a kettle on a hot stove. He wouldn't answer, so I knocked again, but nothing. I tried to open the door, but he had locked it from the other side. I went to grab the master key in the living room, and by that point, the noise from his room was so loud that it had woken up the rest of my family. I was walking toward Negan's room when Dad snatched the keys from my hand and he angrily marched to the room. Dad unlocked the door and opened it. That's when I could see a black figure standing in the middle of the room. It turned its head to look at us for a split of a second, but then it jumped out of the window, shattering the glass in the process before Dad could turn on the light. Dad and I went inside the room, but couldn't find Negan. I told him I was going outside to find him, but then Dad stopped me and said, "Look at the room, son. Other than the shattered glasses, do you see any sign of distress?" He was right. The room was neat. There were no blood or any sign of struggle. "Son, the thing that jumped out of the window? That was Negan." As crazy as it sounded, he was right. Negan was strong and he could fight like nobody's business. If he was attacked, there was no way he would go down without a fight, and there had to be some kind of evidence to that in the room. But this room was in near perfect condition. Dad told me that he knew what was happening with Negan, but he still told me to call the police while he went out to search for him. The cops came and they helped my dad with the search effort until sunrise. We have a tight-knit community here, and my dad is a well-respected figure, so the officers were more than willing to lend a hand. The following days, many other folks in town helped with the search effort, but Negan was nowhere to be seen. The search was ceased after a week because we all knew if Negan wanted to disappear in the forest, there was nothing that we could do to find him. Not only do we have a huge expanse of wilderness here, but you also have to factor in the fact that Negan knows his way around it. We weren't going to find them until he decides to show up by his own will. On the very night the search had ended, understandably my family were in a somber mood. Mom hadn't gone back to work since Negan's disappearance. She still cried a lot and would rarely come out of her room. We all understood her sadness. After all, Negan was the last connection she had to her sister. We were all sad, but the heartache Mom felt was just on another level. Dad took me, my sister, and brother out to the yard that night and said he has something to tell us. This is what he had to say. Your cousin isn't coming back, at least not as you remember him. I suspected he wasn't here for family reunion. He came back because he had an unfinished business. I knew he was changing around the time when he turned 14. I should have been more stern with him. I should have stopped him when he began performing the rituals. You guys might think I wanted him out of our lives, but that wasn't the case at all. I was always strict with you guys, but I tried the softer approach with Negan. He had lost so much already, and I didn't want to drive him away. That was my mistake. I should have raised him as strict as I raised you kids, and I wasn't doing him any favor by cutting him more slack. I tried to undo the damages he'd done with the rituals, but it wasn't good enough. I should have never let him leave our home, but when he did, I'm sure for the 2 years that he was alone, he slowly drifted away toward the evil. That's what misguided spirits do. They take you away from your loved ones and put you in the most vulnerable position. With enough time, they will transform you into an evil creature. The Skinwalker, Ghost Witch, Wendigo, and such, these are all human interpretation of different source of human downfall into nefarious creatures. Negan is one of them now, and he will never go back to being a human being again. The reason why I tell you this is because you need to understand the dangers of our forest now. Things have changed with Negan. He still remembers you right now, but as time passes, he'll slowly forget all of us. He might come near the house in his human form, and they'll try to lure you into the forest. You are to never follow him. You have to believe me. Negan is no longer your cousin. Starting tomorrow, I'll begin performing cleansing rituals in the forest nearby. I'll be installing sacred items and signs throughout our property, and under no circumstances you are to remove them without my permission. Remember, the forest is no longer a safe place, not until I'm finished with my cleansing. And that was pretty much it. He told us he loved us and gave us all a big bear hug. Dad performed his ritual for nearly a month, and it took that long because we owned a huge chunk of land surrounding our house, so it's no surprise that it took another 2 months for him to finish installing all sorts of ancient signs and ceremonial items throughout our property. After that, Dad told us we were safe within our property, but he warned us to never venture deep into the forest. He mentioned that the law of nature worked differently where human influence was limited. It's also important to note that when my father speaks of nature, he doesn't only mean animals and plants, he is including everything, the spirits, the energy of the land, and our connection to the afterlife. The reason why I was inspired to write about this is because of something that happened to me just a few days ago. I no longer live with my parents. In fact, I live in a different state now. I came back home to visit Mom and Dad and had planned to stay with them for a week. The older I get, the more I want to learn about my tradition and culture, so instead of going on a vacation with friends, I decided I'd spend some time with Mom and Pop while also learning of my Cherokee heritage from them. So I was helping Dad with repairing and replacing some of the signs and ceremonial items scattered throughout our property. We worked all day and it was getting late. We were near the boundary of our property. Dad was repairing a sign about 30 yards east from me. That's when I heard someone call out my name in the most bizarre voice I ever heard.
Sequoyah. Sequoyah.
That's my Cherokee name. But no one, not even my father, calls me by that name. The only person who calls me Sequoyah is my cousin. I was on my knees repairing a wooden post, so I stand up and look around. My dad was still working on the sign about 30 yards east from me, and I saw Negan standing and smiling at me from about 20 yards west from me where I was standing. He looked happy, but something felt wrong. Then Negan gestured with his arms for me to come to him, and he said,
"Come on, I've got something to show you. Sequoyah, let's go."
Then I heard someone run toward me from the back of my head. I quickly turned around and saw that it was my father. You know that's not your cousin anymore, right? I know, but he still remembers my name, Dad. I turned around again, facing the direction Negan was standing just seconds ago, but he was no longer there. The experience has motivated me even further to learn more from my father of everything there's to know about living as a true Cherokee. I'm thinking of moving back to my hometown to stay closer to my family. After all, my sister and brother are still in the area, and I don't feel safe for them with me living so far away. My brother is married and already has 2 kids. I know he'll do well to keep his family safe, but I feel that I also have the responsibility to keep my entire family safe from whatever evil lurks in this world. I'm going back to Dallas to make preparation for the move back to my hometown. I can choose to find a job or I can work for my father. Either ways, I'm coming back home. As for Negan, Dad says there's no salvation for him. He knows better and is probably right, but I plan to speak to the elders in town to explore other options. Hopefully there is a way to bring him back, or at the very least, free him from his miserable existence. I'll fill you in on the developments once I get settled in back home. I'll be in touch. Goodbye. Ladies and gentlemen, this is all I've got for you for today, but another video is in the works and it's coming soon for your viewing pleasure. As is customary here on this channel, allow me to thank Madison for sending in the first story. I gotta say, your story brought back some memories of my own adolescence. Not the part about the picturesque town, because my hometown is the complete opposite of yours, but the part about doing dumb things as a teen. Yeah, that resonates quite a bit. I also tried Ouija board, I believe when I was in high school. I tried it with friends in my house, which was dumb, but fortunately nothing happened and it kind of ended in a boring manner because there was this one friend who just wouldn't stop laughing. But it wasn't all that bad since that got my then girlfriend scared and she was very clingy that day. I think I kind of enjoyed that when I was in my teens. But enough of my horny teen behavior. Sorry, this is again why I shouldn't do the outro on the fly. I am sorry, Madison. So yeah, the story ended rather tragically and you wanted the opinions of my viewers so you could help your friend Chloe. So viewers, if you've got any advice for Madison, please don't hesitate to share in the comments section. Once again, thank you for the story and I hope all turns out well with your friend. On to the second story, and of course I'd like to thank Sequoyah for sending in his truly spooky tale. I hope I've pronounced your name correctly because I'm sure in Native American tongue it's probably pronounced differently. I should have asked you about that when I spoke to you on Skype. That was very unprofessional of me and I do apologize for that. Anywho, I think I do the same things that you are planning to do if I were in your shoes. I don't think I feel comfortable being so far away from my family with looming danger on the horizon. I agree with you, and I think you are doing the right thing. As for your cousin, I guess your father knows what he's talking about, but here's me hoping that your talk with the elders will shed some light on new information. Hopefully something positive for your cousin's sake and for all your family as well. You know, I'm fascinated with all the Native American stories, and not only the scary ones. I truly think it's one of the more profound cultures that don't get enough attention from scholars and academia in general. I've read a couple of books on Native American philosophy and culture when I was in college, but I think I haven't read another one since. I think I'm going to remedy that pretty soon. I hope the move back home goes smoothly, and I wish you and your family the very best going forward. Thank you, Sequoyah.